Hebrews chapter 7. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read the first 15 verses. What I want you to do is just kind of take note of interesting things, and we'll discuss them as we get done. Okay? Hebrews chapter 7, starting in verse 1. And I'm reading from the New American Standard Version, so follow along best you can. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham as he was returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham apportioned a 10th part of all the spoils, was first of all, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, which is King of Peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he remains a priest perpetually. Now observe how great this man was, to whom Abraham the patriarch gave a 10th of the choicest spoils. And those indeed of the sons of Levi who received the priest's office have commandment in the law to collect a 10th from the people, that is, from their brethren, although these are descended from Abraham. But the one whose genealogy is not traced from them collected a 10th from Abraham, and blessed the one who had the promises. But without any dispute, the lesser is blessed by the greater. In this case, mortal men receive tithes, but in that case, one receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives on. And so to speak, through Abraham, even Levi, who received tithes, paid tithes. For he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the people received the law, what further need was there for any other priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek, and not be designated according to the order of Aaron? For when the priesthood is changed of necessity, there takes place a change of the law also. A change of law also. For the one concerning whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe, from which no one has officiated at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, a tribe with reference to which Moses spoke nothing concerning the priests. And this is clearer still, if another priest arises according to the likeness of Melchizedek. I'll just read 16. Who has become such not on the basis of a law of physical requirement, but according to the power of an indestructible life. Okay, so I apologize. I should have had that out of an easier-to-read translation. But in those 15 verses, 16, anything interesting that you notice? So I have 13 things that I listed that this text mentions about Melchizedek, and I'm just going to read them really quickly. We're not going to discuss all of them, but I'm just going to list out the things that these 15 verses mention about him, okay? Here we go. First, verse 1, he's the king of Salem. 2, he's priest of the Most High. 3, he's blessed by Abraham. 4, he's given a 10th or tithe. That's verse 2. He's the king of righteousness, verse 2. King of peace. He's without father, mother, or genealogy, verse 3. He's without beginning of days or end of life, verse 3. He's a priest of God forever. He's not a descendant of Abraham, nor in the Levitical line, and that's 4 and 5. Receives tithes as a priest, 6. Is superior to Abraham, verse 7. And Jesus is in the line of Melchizedek, 11 to 15. Okay? So those are just kind of the overview things that this text mentions about our dear friend Mel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pick basically 3 things that are mentioned about Melchizedek in these 15 verses to talk about. There's an argument that's being laid out that the writer is building towards, and that is the culmination of that is at the end of chapter 7. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so last week we looked at some of these. First, where does Melchizedek show up? Where's his first appearance? Genesis 14. And what happens there? As we mentioned last week, there's these nations that are battling, and Lot gets captured. And Abraham, who is a force of power in the region at this point, mounts a rescue to go save Lot. And I say he's a force of rescue because, think about it, whoever these nations are, and it lists them, but that's not important right now, they are able to conquer Sodom and Gomorrah. But then Abraham's able to come in and conquer them, right? So he's a powerful force, and it even, if you go back and look, it even discusses that, like, he's a strategist. He, if I remember correctly, divides his forces so that they come at different angles or different times, and so he's his own force at this time. So he rescues Lot. After he does that, out of nowhere, Melchizedek shows up and blesses him, right? And Abraham gives him a tithe. So the moral of that story is that we should all tithe, of course, because Abraham did, right? No, that's stupid. That's not the moral of the story. There's so much more to that than just a proof text to show that we in the current church should give tithes. All right?
It does kind of show that there seems to be some kind of precedent before the law,
right,
for a sacrificial / tithing system.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we talked about last week. That was, of all the things I talked about last week that I don't remember, that's the most interesting to me. Because it presupposes that something else is in existence in that area that Abraham comes across. Okay, so we said that Melchizedek is the king of a proto-Jerusalem. Remember we said that Salem, he's the king of Salem. Salem is half of Jerusalem, right? It is assumed that that in this area there's a kingdom of people who worship Elohim, okay? Because he's called King of Salem, and he's the king of the Most High, or he's the priest of the Most High God, which is Elohim. So, okay, he's not just at his mama's house declaring himself king, and he just has this weird title that he calls himself. That's ridiculous. Okay, so this means that there's a kingdom there in pre-Jerusalem where Melchizedek is king to the Most High, and there's some kind of system that is in place because when Abraham comes across it, he knows what to do. And I think, as Lee mentioned, he is a king and he's a priest. It can also be assumed that the people in the surrounding region, as we mentioned last week, knew this was the kingdom of Elohim and knew what the customs were. Because it's not as if Abraham has to ask Melchizedek what to do, and it's not as if Melchizedek tells him what to do. He just knows what to do. So that leads me to believe that the surrounding peoples know that this is some kind of Elohim worship and know the traditions and know the rituals so that when they come across them, they automatically know what to do. So real quick, I know that that's like something to chew on with your brain, right? That's just interesting. Do we have any thoughts about that from last week or anything that I said? Oh, and I said this, okay, like last week in passing. So we know that Eden is supposedly in that area, right? Now, I don't think Salem is Eden because, humanity was banished from that. And we're going to discuss a little bit more about that in just a minute when we get into the weird stuff. Just real quick, Ashley, we were pitching thoughts back and forth about this. So do you remember in the description of Eden, there's these rivers, right? And they flow out of Eden. There's a couple things there. One of the things that you're supposed to take away from that is that Eden and these rivers feed the world. Life comes from Eden and feeds humanity, right? But also, if you have waters flowing from Eden, it has to be elevated. Hold on to that. Every time someone in the Old Testament says they're going to Jerusalem, they always say they're going up. I'm making the connection that the reason for that is because you're supposed to think of Jerusalem as the city that gives life to the world. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking. Any of that interesting? You have any thoughts on any of that stuff? Do you think I'm absolutely crazy? I'll just go ahead and say I don't think it exists at this time, but we'll talk more about that in just a second. All of that makes sense. Okay, I have not mentioned aliens. I have not mentioned, floating pyramids or Atlantis. Okay, all of those things make logical sense. The last thing I want to mention about this is, and I think Ashley mentioned this last week on the drive home, and I was thinking about it for days afterwards. If God has a people in Jerusalem, in Proto-Jerusalem, why doesn't he use them to build a nation? Why does he go outside of that nation to the land of Ur to call Abraham? Okay? None of that is like me being weird. If Melchizedek is king of the Most High in Salem, in Jerusalem, why doesn't God just raise someone out of that to build his people? Okay, I'll just share them out. Ready? Okay, this is so cool. So God has his kingdom. Why doesn't he just build it? Why does he go to the pagan Ur, raise up Abraham, and bring him into the land? Okay, so here I have three reasons why I think this is true. What?
Are these the reasons we talked about?
I don't know. Okay, maybe they are. If they are, you just say, yep, that was it. Okay, 3 things. God demonstrates his desire for those on the outside to be brought into the family of God. So God has his kingdom in Salem where they worship Elohim, and he goes outside of that kingdom to build his nation and his covenant people with a pagan. Right? So that demonstrates that God always has in mind to bring in those who are not his people. And that has ties to the New Testament, because it's to the Jew first, then to the Gentiles, right? So that pattern of God did not do everything in Israel just for Israel. God did it so that the nations would come to him. Right? Okay. So that's 1. 2, God wanted the drama of the unfolding story of and from Abraham to Joshua to be the historical underpinnings for his people. God brings them out from the nations, out of slavery, back to Eden and back to himself. Right? God wants that story to be what gives the people their context in history. Okay? Because that's what you're supposed to, I don't know if we ever do this. You're supposed to make the connection that God bringing his people into the promised land is God bringing his people back to Eden. Right? And then 3, God wanted the drama to serve as a backdrop for the gospel. There he does the same as he brings in outsiders to Eden through the cross. This is the pattern of God. God does not have to create a people for himself. He has it. He already has it in Salem. He already has it in Israel. God loves to bring in outsiders. And that's what we see in the New Testament. Because why do you need the Old Testament? Because it helps you understand everything that Jesus did. Right? So it's a backdrop for the gospel story. Okay. Did I cover what you were talking about, Ashley?
You talked about the first one, about his desire to always bring in those outside.
This is why the Bible is so interesting, because you can read it and take a warm, fuzzy devotional away and apply it to your life in some nice, happy way that makes you feel good, or you can just chew on it and things start to nourish you. Okay, so now let's jump into some weird stuff. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the verses that Lee brought up. Okay. Verse 3, he's without father, without mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. Okay?
Just spitball this.
Go
Is
for
there
it.
any chance that he is a supernatural being? Or...
You just hold on.
Okay.
You're good. Okay. So, I kind of debated on how to do this. Okay. We're going to enter kind of a time of Bible study where you may disagree with me and I may disagree with you, and guess what? We both love Jesus, so it's fine. Okay? This is also something that is not common in a Bible study. Okay? So just buckle up and let's just go on this journey together. Okay. So, there's basically two lines of thought with what these verses mean. Okay? All right. And again, you can disagree with me, that's fine. Here's the two lines of thought. One line of thought pays more attention to the context and the argument found in Hebrews. Okay? So, one of the things that we do, and it's wrong, it's awful, it's like, did you ever watch Predator? Anybody here ever see Predator? Okay? So you have this, this I think they're Navy SEALs, and their mission is to, they've got some bad guys have captured some of their agents, and so their mission is to take these helicopters into the jungle, drop in, extract their operatives, pull them out, and go home. Right? That's the mission, but it all goes sideways. Right? Well, sometimes we see that's how we treat the Bible. It's like we're just flying along and we just drop in, we find something interesting and we pull it out and we go on with it. And I think that is a terrible way to read the Bible. Okay? All that to say this. The first line of thought pays attention to what is happening in Hebrews. Okay? The second pays more attention to extra biblical traditions surrounding Melchizedek. Okay? And we're going to talk more about it in just a minute. There are traditions and letters and books and a line of thinking at the time of this that are very popular. Okay? Okay. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the extra biblical traditions. Okay? In other words, the traditions outside of the Bible, in the Bible that we have. Okay? All right, so let's talk about the book of Enoch. There are three. Now, look, I did my best. I did my best to do as much studying on this as I possibly could. I read articles. I listened to about the first 30 or 40 plus chapters of the book of Enoch. I did everything I could to make myself as effective as possible without receiving a paycheck. Okay, so in other words, I did my best. If you want more, you need to pay me, because this is not like a theological class. So I just did my best. Okay, so there's 3 books of Enoch. All right. Enoch 2 mentions Melchizedek and gives more information about him. Okay. All right. So that's what I'm going to look at for like 5 minutes. The extra biblical book of Enoch and what it says about Melchizedek and why is that important. That's what I'm going to talk about for just like 5 minutes. So here we go. According to the book of Enoch, Melchizedek is a descendant of Lamech. Okay? Does anybody know who Lamech is?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't.
You'll know it. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows who Lamech is, right? I mean, he's such a popular character. Okay, before my wife looks it up and spoils it. Who is Lamech? Lamech is from the line of Cain. Cain and Abel. Genesis. Lamech says this in Genesis 4, 23 and 24. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Remember that guy? One of those stories in Genesis where it's just like, there it is, and then life moves on, right? So, the book of Enoch says that Melchizedek is a descendant of Lamech, which means he's a descendant of Cain. Okay. All right, so here we go. Just listen. And I'm not saying I agree with all this. Just listen. This is what Enoch says. In the story, Ner, N-I-R, a priest, has a wife named Sothanin. Okay. They're both very old. She conceives in her old age without having intercourse with her husband. And she was also believed to be incapable of having children. Okay? She hides herself from Ner, her husband, all the days of her pregnancy. And at the end of her pregnancy, Ner discovers that she's pregnant and wants to send her away. Right? Because he's a priest. And priest of what? I don't know. I'm just giving you the story that's given in Enoch. So he doesn't want to be shamed as a priest or lose his position. And so he wants to send her away. Well, as he confronts her, she dies at his feet. Okay? And then the story goes that from her dead body, she gives birth to Melchizedek. Okay, so she's dead and gives birth at his feet. Okay. The text seems to indicate that she is born from her corpse. Then Ner, the husband, and Noah comes to bury the wife. When Noah comes, they find Melchizedek at his mother's side, fully developed as a child. And it's that phrase, I don't quite understand what that means. But just hold on. Fully developed and in some type of priestly apparel. Okay? So his mom is dead. He's a baby. And when Noah comes to bury her, the baby is found fully formed, dressed in some kind of proto-priest outfit. Okay? And the child is speaking and blessing God. Okay? What happens next? Noah and Ner then take the child and hide the child because they fear the people. Like, something supernatural is going on here. Let's hide this kid because I don't know what's going to happen. They hide the child until Gabriel the angel comes, takes Melchizedek as this child. Well, no, I'm not going to say it. A few other things happen. But God gives orders to Gabriel to come and take Melchizedek and to protect him. Gabriel comes, takes Melchizedek, and takes him into the Garden of Eden. And that is where Melchizedek is the priest forever, in the Garden of Eden. Okay? And somehow, I'm doing my best to keep this as my understanding as possible, okay? All right? The Eden is protected from the flood, and once the flood subsides, Melchizedek is ordained as the priest of Eden. Okay? All right. There there's the story, the best I can give it. All right. Follow that. All right. Okay. So, why is that important? Okay, so Enoch, the book, is significant. It is significant because while it is unknown who wrote it, so these old texts, it's very difficult, and it takes a lot of research, and it takes actually time to uncover like more and more information, right? So nobody knows who wrote it, and they also don't know that it was completed all at the same time, that it could have been like more and more added as it went on. But the dates are difficult. So some say it was written around 400 BC. Others say it could have been written as late as the 1st century AD. Okay? Now why is this important? Because this text was fairly influential and popular in the late and early centuries. It is believed by many that this text is partially, at least, responsible for the development of such ideas in the New Testament as hell, demons, and their origins, as well as their role. Okay? And just hold on, I'll flesh that out in just a second. It also fleshes out what happens in Genesis 6. Do y'all remember Genesis 6? What happens in Genesis 6? You were just thinking about it. I know you were. That's where the angels come and they have a good time with the women, right? So let me flesh this phrase out. Some believe that it's partially responsible for the development of the ideas such as the New Testament's understanding of hell, demons, and angels and their role. What does that mean? I'm not saying that the New Testament's understanding of hell, demons, and angels is wrong. I'm just saying that many believe that the ideas in Enoch help influence the people's understanding and beliefs on those systems. Okay? In other words, I do believe the things that Jesus said, but culturally, I think Enoch was very responsible for the things they already believed. So, back to Hebrews. Okay? Because that's what we're doing. We're trying to understand Hebrews, right? 1st century document. Okay, so we need to look at what's influential at that time. So the writer of Hebrews could be playing off on these stories with regard to Enoch's origins. In other words, those phrases we looked at, without father, without mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, all of that could be playing off on the spiritual understanding of the peoples of this time and the influential writing of Enoch and saying, wink, wink, nod, nod. You remember those weird stories about Enoch? Yeah, I'm playing off of those. Okay, that could be one of the things that's happening. So that's one thing. That's that one line of thought. But now I'm going to talk about what I think. Okay, I think I'm talking about the writer of Hebrews. I think it's more likely that the writer of Hebrews is playing on the ideas of the lack of information found in Genesis and his character. So in other words, I think the writer of Hebrews is saying without father or mother because he's building an argument about genealogy. Because genealogy was really important to the Jews, right? Ashley, why was genealogy really important to the Jews? Do you remember?
Well, that was their identity and their salvation, basically.
Okay. In other words, so some of the specifics were who's in line to be a priest, who's in line to be a king, who's related to whose father because of land.
Yeah, if you're not an Israelite, you're a Gentile,
right.
unclean.
So I think the writer of Hebrews is playing off on these ideas that nothing is mentioned about Melchizedek in regards to any of that stuff that the Jews hold very important. Okay? Because it doesn't say anything about him. So therefore, we don't know anything about him. All right, so the context, I think, there leads to the argument. Something that the writer's doing, and I'm sorry that this is headache. I really apologize. I'm really trying. But you're trying to get into the mindset of a person, so it's not like it's fluffy rainbows. Sometimes it's difficult. But we're going to see this in a minute. The writer of Hebrews is trying to say that even though Jesus is not in the line of the priests, he can still be a priest. And so I think he's saying, we know nothing about Melchizedek. He's not in the line of the priests, but everyone in our culture sees him as, hey, it's okay. Melchizedek is a priest of the Most High. Therefore, Jesus is like him.
Well, not just everyone in their culture. Like, they're going back to the father of Israel.
Yeah.
They're saying, if Abraham approves this, then you should too.
Yeah. Okay, so let me speed up here. So, Justin, do you think that Enoch should be scripture? I personally don't. So, in my readings of Enoch, this is my biggest issue with the book of Enoch. It places more of the blame for all of the evils of humanity on the role of the angels. In other words, all of the evils in our world are linked not as much to humanity's problems as it is to the crazy actions of angels. And that doesn't line up with anything that I see in the New Testament or the Old Testament for that matter. It also seems to be preoccupied with angels and the lack of heavenly order, and everything's out of control. Listen to the first 45 minutes and they'll be playing some weird music behind the text. It's fine. It's very preoccupied with angels. Okay, and I can't really get into this. At the time, people were very interested in angels, which is one reason why I think the book of Enoch was popular. I also this is where you may disagree with me. And guess what? I have my reasons, and I can't get into it. But the book of Enoch says X happened in Genesis 6, where the angels and all that mess, and humanity. This is what happened. I strongly disagree with what they say this happened. Okay, and I'm just going to say it. And we can argue about it if you want to. I do not believe that angels had offspring with women in Genesis 6. I don't believe that happened. What I think is going on there is it's the godly line of Seth and being mixed with the ungodly line of Cain, and that's where you get judgment that follows. Okay, and that's okay. You can disagree with me. That's fine. I get it. And there's other things behind all of that. But I don't think that's the sons of God having offspring with the daughters of men. I don't think that's talking about angels.
Are angels ever referred to as sons of God anywhere else in Scripture? They are.
Yeah. But Adam is also called a son of God. So I don't think that that's the best argument. But anyway, so that's my opinion. All right, let's move on. Okay? Because I don't want to talk about Enoch the whole time. So this is what I think the writer of Hebrews is doing, okay? Melchizedek has an interesting genealogy. Jesus also has an interesting genealogy. Melchizedek is a priest, not in the line of Aaron. Jesus is a priest, not in the line of Aaron. Also, Melchizedek is superior to Abraham. Jesus is superior to Abraham. Any thoughts on any of that hugeness that we just talked about?
He also says that, not just Abraham, he's superior than Abraham, he's also saying he's superior than the priests themselves, because he says that Levi, through Abraham, gave him a tent. And so he's saying not only is he a priest, he's a better priest than the ones you...
Okay, so let's pick up in verse 22. This makes Jesus Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. 23. The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in the office. But he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Okay, so I have 8 minutes, so I'm going to go through some of these verses and just hold on. So 5 things that I pick up out of these verses. Number 1, in verse 22, Jesus is the guarantor of a better covenant. 2, there were many priests because they all died and could not continue. Verse 23. Jesus is the permanent priest because he lives forever. 24. He can save to the utmost those who draw near to God through him. 25. Because he is the priest forever, he lives forever in this role to make intercession for us. Okay? So I want to focus on the last two elements of that. Okay? He can save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, and that he lives forever to make intercession for us. I want to focus on those as we wrap things up. Okay? All right. Number one, he can save to the utmost those who draw near to God through him. Jesus can save to the uttermost. You ready? Greek. In the Greek it says this. Jesus can save perfectly and or completely. All right? There is no I need Jesus and X. Instead, all we need for our salvation is found in the one who serves forever. All right, next, those who draw near to God. Greek. I love this. Those who come up to God or approach God. Here, because of the context, we're meant to see ourselves approaching the true and final priest in the temple. Okay, as he offers complete and perfect salvation through his mediation. So the language that's used in chapter 7 is that of the priesthood. And so you're supposed to still have the imagery of the temple in your mind, right? And, in the temple you would go up the steps to the priest, and then you would go into the Holy of Holies. Okay, so you're going up to the true and final priest, all right? No more does the one we approach have sins that he has to make offerings for himself? That's something else that's mentioned in chapter 7. The priests had to make offerings for their own sin. Jesus does not, right? Instead, we approach the sinless, spotless, perfect Son who mediates in perfection on behalf of those who approach. So this word here, those who draw near to God through him, is a present active verb, meaning that it is actively what his people do. We've mentioned in the past, what does it mean to be a Christian? How do you know if you're a Christian? Here, in this verse, it says that the Christian is marked by his continually going to the Son, continually going to the high priest, continually going to the one who mediates forever. Like the fragrance of your life is, I continually go to him. And the second thing, he is the priest forever. He lives forever in this role to make intercession for us. Jesus always lives to make intercession for them. Greek. In the Greek it says this. Jesus is always living to intercede for us. The fact that Jesus rose from the dead is the yes and amen to everything that happened on the cross. But the fact that he rose from the dead and is alive gives your heart rest, because Hebrews 7:25 says he forever lives to intercede for you. He stands forever in God's presence, mediating on your behalf for you, right? The word living here is where we get life, okay, Zoe. So Jesus' life is intercession for you and me. Now this means that we as believers still need intercession, and that's going to be really important, because I'm just going to tell you this. I don't know what your thoughts were on Hebrews chapter 6. We took two lessons to talk about that really hard verse about crucifying Jesus again and all that mess. Oh gosh, that was hard. Well, we're heading now towards chapter 10, and there's something even harder in chapter 10. So some of the truths that he's making the argument for, that he's heading towards, are really important. And one of those is Jesus still intercedes for you. Like, you still need an intercession, which means you are not perfect, right? And that's going to be really important as we get to chapter 10. But note, you still need him, and your life as a Christian should be marked by your drawing near to him. Okay? Okay. And I'm going to stop right there, because what I do here, and it's really good. Like after this lesson, after studying this lesson, praise God for verses 26 through 28. Because what I do is I take those phrases that it talks about Jesus and I break them down into what their Greek meaning is. And I want to do that next week. Okay? And it's really good. But I'll just finish by reading these verses and then we'll look at them next week. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever.